3 weeks after the rescue at Devil's Canyon, the Thompson family's life had settled into a new routine centered around recovery and healing. Emma's fractured leg was mending well in its bright pink cast, which she had decorated with drawings of Rex performing various heroic deeds. The little girl had become something of a local celebrity, with news reporters and neighbors stopping by regularly to hear the incredible story of her survival. But Emma always insisted that Rex was the real hero of their adventure. "I was so scared when I fell," she would tell visitors, her small hand resting on Rex's head as he lay beside her chair. "But Rex jumped down to save me. He kept me warm all night and wouldn't let me fall off the ledge. He's the bravest dog in the whole world." Rex had recovered remarkably well from his injuries, though he still limped slightly on his injured paw when the weather was cold. The veterinarian, Dr. Martinez, had been amazed by the dog's resilience and intelligence. Dogs with his level of protective instinct and problem-solving ability are extremely rare, she had explained to Sarah and Mike. Rex didn't just react on impulse when Emma fell. He deliberately positioned himself to provide maximum protection, and then maintained that position for hours, despite his own pain and fear. Mike had returned from his business trip the morning after the rescue, his face pale with shock, when Sarah called to explain what had happened. He had driven through the night to reach the hospital, arriving just as Emma was waking up from surgery to repair her broken leg. His first words were directed not to Sarah or Emma, but to Rex, who was resting on a blanket beside Emma's hospital bed. "Thank you, boy," Mike had whispered, kneeling down to stroke Rex's fur with tears in his eyes. "Thank you for protecting our little girl." The story of Rex's heroic rescue had spread far beyond Pine Valley. A reporter from the regional newspaper had written a feature article titled "Guardian Angel with Four Paws," which was picked up by national news services. Soon, letters and gifts for Rex began arriving from all over the country. Children sent homemade cookies for the heroic dog, while adults wrote heartfelt letters praising Rex's courage and loyalty. The most meaningful recognition came from the Pine Valley Sheriff's Department, which presented Rex with an honorary deputy badge during a special ceremony at the town hall. Sheriff Williams, a tough lawman who rarely showed emotion, had to clear his throat several times while reading the citation. Rex demonstrated extraordinary courage, intelligence, and devotion to duty during a life-threatening emergency, the sheriff read aloud. His actions prevented the loss of human life and exemplify the finest traditions of service and protection. Rex is hereby named an honorary deputy of the Pine Valley Sheriff's Department, with all the respect and recognition that title entails. Emma had insisted on attending the ceremony despite her cast and crutches. She beamed with pride as the sheriff pinned the tiny badge to Rex's collar, and the audience of townspeople erupted in applause. Rex seemed to understand the significance of the moment, sitting perfectly still and tall as cameras flashed around him. But perhaps the most important change in their lives was the deeper bond that had formed between the Thompson family and their remarkable dog. Sarah found herself looking at Rex differently now, seeing not just a pet but a genuine family member who had proven his devotion in the most dramatic way possible. Emma's attachment to Rex had grown even stronger, if that was possible, and she refused to go anywhere without her faithful protector. "Rex and I are a team now," Emma announced one evening as she and the dog worked together on a jigsaw puzzle. "We take care of each other." Rex's heroism had also brought unexpected changes to their daily routine. Sarah had enrolled in a wilderness first aid course determined to be better prepared for any future emergencies. Mike had installed a powerful radio system in their home and purchased emergency GPS beacons for everyone in the family. They had also established better safety protocols for Emma's outdoor playtime, though they were careful not to restrict her freedom too much. Most importantly, they had learned to appreciate the incredible gift they had received when they adopted Rex from the Pine Valley Animal Shelter. Linda Martinez, the volunteer who had introduced them to Rex, visited regularly to check on his recovery and to hear updates about his celebrity status. "I always knew Rex was special," Linda admitted during one of her visits. "But even I never imagined he was capable of something this extraordinary. It makes me wonder about his background and training." Dogs don't usually develop those kinds of protective instincts and problem-solving abilities without some kind of special experience. Sarah had often wondered about Rex's mysterious past, but after the canyon rescue, his history seemed less important than his future with their family. Whether he had been a working dog, a family pet, or something else entirely, Rex had found his true calling as Emma's guardian and their family's protector. The Thompson family's story had a ripple effect throughout Pine Valley and beyond. Local animal shelters saw a dramatic increase in adoptions as families were inspired by Rex's example to welcome rescue dogs into their homes. Several other families in the area also enrolled in wilderness safety courses and upgraded their emergency preparedness after hearing about Emma's accident. Dr. Martinez used Rex's case to educate other pet owners about the remarkable intelligence and loyalty that rescue dogs could display. People often overlook older dogs or mixed breeds when they're looking for pets, she explained to a group of veterinary students. But as Rex proved, these animals can possess extraordinary capabilities and form incredibly strong bonds with their human families. As autumn turned to winter in Pine Valley, the Thompson family settled into their new normal with deep gratitude for their second chance. Emma's leg healed completely, leaving her with only a small scar and an incredible story that she would carry for the rest of her life. Sarah had overcome her fears about their remote location, finding strength in the knowledge that Rex would always be there to protect them. On quiet evenings, when Emma was doing homework and Mike was reading his newspaper, Sarah would often watch Rex lying contentedly by the fireplace and marvel at the chain of events that had brought him into their lives. A lost dog wandering Highway 7 had become their family's salvation, a reminder that heroes sometimes come in the most unexpected forms. Rex seemed to understand his special place in their family's story. He wore his honorary deputy badge with pride, carried himself with the dignified bearing of a true hero, and continued to watch over Emma with the same devoted attention that had saved her life in Devil's Canyon. The bond between the little girl and her remarkable dog had been forged in crisis and would last forever, a testament to the incredible power of love, loyalty, and courage in the face of danger. Their story became a beloved local legend, told and retold around Pine Valley dinner tables and campfires for years to come. But for the Thompson family, it was simply the story of how Rex came home and proved that sometimes, when a child's life hangs in the balance, an ordinary dog can become an extraordinary hero. Sarah's shoulder screamed in pain as she dangled from the rope, her body spinning slowly in the rain-soaked darkness. The impact with the canyon wall had left her disoriented and struggling to regain her grip on the lifeline. Below her, she could hear Emma crying and Rex barking frantically, both of them witnessing her near-fatal slip. "Mommy, are you okay?" Emma's terrified voice echoed up from the ledge just 5 feet below. Sarah forced herself to focus despite the throbbing pain in her shoulder and ribs. She couldn't give up now, not when she was so close to reaching Emma and Rex. Using every ounce of determination she possessed, Sarah managed to stabilize herself on the rope and continue her descent. When her feet finally touched the narrow ledge, Sarah was amazed by how precarious their situation truly was. The rock shelf was barely 3 feet wide and perhaps 6 feet long, with deep cracks running through the stone that suggested it could collapse at any moment. Rex had positioned himself along the outer edge, his powerful body forming a living guardrail that had prevented Emma from rolling off during the night. "Oh, sweetheart," Sarah whispered as she gathered Emma into her arms. Her daughter was shivering uncontrollably, her lips blue with cold, despite the jacket and blanket Sarah had sent down earlier. Emma's right leg was clearly injured, swollen, and bent at an uncomfortable angle that suggested a possible fracture. Rex looked up at Sarah with exhausted but hopeful eyes. The faithful dog's left front paw was bleeding from several deep cuts, probably sustained during his fall into the canyon. His thick coat was soaked with rain, and Sarah could feel him trembling from cold and exhaustion. Despite his own pain and discomfort, Rex had never stopped protecting Emma. "You're such a good boy, Rex," Sarah murmured, gently stroking the dog's wet fur. "You saved Emma's life." Rex's tail managed a weak wag in response to her praise, but Sarah could tell that the heroic dog was reaching the limits of his endurance. They needed to get off this ledge immediately, before the deteriorating weather made rescue impossible. The rain was falling harder now, making the rocks slippery and dangerous. Sarah could hear the ominous sound of water rushing through the canyon below, fed by dozens of small streams cascading down the walls. If the storm intensified much more, flash flooding would make the canyon floor impassable for any rescue team trying to reach them from below. Sarah quickly assessed their situation. The extension cord lifeline was strong enough to support one person at a time, but she couldn't carry both Emma and Rex up the 40-foot cliff face simultaneously. Emma's injured leg made it impossible for her to climb on her own, and Rex was too heavy for Sarah to lift while rappelling up the rope. "Emma, I need you to be very brave," Sarah said, holding her daughter close. "I'm going to take you up first, then come back for Rex." "No," Emma cried, her small arms tightening around Rex's neck. "I won't leave Rex. He protected me all night. We have to save him too." Sarah's heart swelled with pride at her daughter's loyalty, but she also knew that Emma's emotional attachment to Rex could put all three of them in greater danger. "Rex will be okay for a few more minutes," she promised. "I'll come right back for him." Rex seemed to understand the conversation and gently nuzzled Emma's cheek, as if encouraging her to go with Sarah. The intelligent dog's selfless nature was evident even in this desperate moment, putting Emma's safety above his own survival. Sarah secured Emma to her climbing harness using additional rope, creating a makeshift carrier that would allow her to climb while keeping both hands free. Emma weighed only 45 pounds, but the additional burden would make the ascent extremely difficult, especially with Sarah's injured shoulder. "Hold on tight, sweetie," Sarah instructed as she prepared to begin the climb. "Don't look down, just keep your arms around my neck." The first 10 feet of the ascent went smoothly, with Sarah finding adequate handholds on the rocky wall. But as they climbed higher, the rock became more crumbly and unstable. The rain had loosened soil and small stones that cascaded down around them, and Sarah's injured shoulder made it increasingly difficult to maintain her grip. Halfway up the canyon wall, disaster struck again. A large section of rock that Sarah was using as a handhold suddenly broke away, sending her and Emma swinging wildly on the rope. Emma screamed in terror as they slammed into the canyon wall, and Sarah felt her strength beginning to fade. From the ledge below, Rex began barking with renewed urgency, but this wasn't a bark of fear or desperation. Instead, the dog was barking in a specific pattern that Sarah had heard before during their weekend hikes. Rex was using the same alert bark he made when he spotted wildlife or found something interesting on the trail. Following Rex's gaze, Sarah spotted what the observant dog had noticed. About 15 feet to their right, partially hidden by vegetation, was a narrow but sturdy rocky outcropping that formed a natural pathway up the canyon wall. It wasn't visible from directly below, but from their current position on the rope, Sarah could see that it might provide a safer route to the top. Using the last of her strength, Sarah swung the rope sideways until she could reach the hidden pathway. The route was steep and challenging, but it offered solid footing and reliable handholds. Even more importantly, it was wide enough for her to carry Emma without relying entirely on the rope for support. "Rex found us a better way out," Sarah told Emma as they began ascending the rocky pathway. "That smart dog just saved us again." The climb up the hidden route took 20 minutes of careful navigation, but it was infinitely safer than trying to rappel up the sheer canyon wall. When they finally reached the top, Sarah was exhausted but triumphant. Emma was safe, but their rescue was only half complete. "Now we have to get Rex," Emma said immediately, despite her own injuries and exhaustion. Sarah looked back down at the ledge where Rex waited patiently in the rain. The loyal dog had been watching their entire ascent, his tail wagging with relief when he saw them reach safety. But now Sarah faced the challenge of rescuing a 70-pound injured dog from a precarious ledge 40 feet below. The storm was intensifying, and Sarah knew she was running out of time. But Rex had risked everything to save Emma, and Sarah was determined to return that loyalty. She couldn't abandon the heroic dog who had protected her daughter through the longest, most terrifying night of their lives. "Stay right here and don't move," Sarah instructed Emma, wrapping her in dry blankets she had brought from the house. Mommy is going to bring Rex home." As Sarah prepared for her second descent into the canyon, she could hear the distant sound of sirens approaching through the forest. The rescue team was finally arriving, but they might be too late. The storm was turning the canyon into a death trap, and Rex was weakening with each passing minute. Sarah rappelled down the canyon wall one more time, her injured body protesting every movement. When she reached the ledge, Rex greeted her with a tired but grateful whimper. The brave dog had been alone in the storm for nearly an hour, shivering and bleeding but never abandoning his post. "Come here, boy," Sarah whispered, fashioning a harness around Rex's chest and shoulders using the remaining rope. "Emma is safe because of you. Now it's time to get you home." The ascent with Rex was the most difficult challenge Sarah had ever faced. The injured dog couldn't help much with the climb, forcing Sarah to bear most of his weight while navigating the treacherous rocky pathway. Her muscles screamed in agony, and several times she thought they would both fall to their deaths. But Rex seemed to understand that Sarah was risking her life to save him, just as he had risked his life to save Emma. The intelligent dog remained perfectly still during the climb, never struggling or panicking despite his obvious fear and pain. His trust in Sarah gave her the strength to continue when her body wanted to give up. When they finally reached the top of the canyon, Sarah collapsed in exhaustion beside Emma and Rex. All three of them were injured, soaked, and exhausted, but they were alive and together. Rex immediately limped over to Emma and began licking her face, as if reassuring himself that she was truly safe. The rescue team arrived just as Sarah was catching her breath. Professional paramedics quickly assessed Emma's injuries and determined that her leg was fractured but not life-threatening. Rex was treated by a veterinarian who had accompanied the rescue team, receiving stitches for his paw cuts and medication for his pain. As the paramedics prepared to transport Emma to the hospital, she refused to be separated from Rex. "He saved my life," she insisted through her tears. "Rex jumped down to protect me when I fell. He stayed with me all night and kept me warm. He's a hero." The rescue team leader, a gruff mountain man named Captain Rodriguez, knelt down beside Rex and gently examined the dog's injuries. "I've been doing wilderness rescues for 20 years, he told Sarah quietly. "I've never seen anything like what this dog did tonight. His positioning on that ledge was perfect. His protection of your daughter was instinctive and intelligent. Dogs like this one are rare treasures." Sarah looked down at Rex, who was resting his large head on Emma's lap, despite his own exhaustion and pain. The loyal German Shepherd mix had proven himself to be far more than just a family pet. He was a true hero, whose courage, intelligence, and unwavering devotion had prevented an unspeakable tragedy. As they were loaded into the rescue vehicles for the trip to town, Emma kept. The temperature continued to drop as Sarah frantically searched her surroundings for anything that might help with the rescue. Her flashlight revealed scattered branches, loose rocks, and thick vines, but nothing that seemed adequate for reaching Emma and Rex 40 feet below. The sound of Emma's chattering teeth drifted up from the ledge, confirming Sarah's worst fears about hypothermia setting in. Sarah ran back toward the house, crashing through the underbrush with desperate speed. She needed rope, blankets, and some way to communicate with the outside world. Her mind raced through possible solutions as she stumbled over roots and pushed past low-hanging branches that seemed determined to slow her down. At the house, Sarah grabbed every piece of rope and extension cord she could find, along with several thick blankets and her warmest jacket. She also retrieved Mike's emergency kit from the garage, which contained a hand-crank radio, emergency flares, and a basic first aid kit. Most importantly, she found Mike's climbing gear from their weekend hiking adventures, including a harness and some carabiners. Racing back to the canyon took precious time, but Sarah forced herself to move carefully through the dark forest. She couldn't help Emma if she got lost or injured herself. Rex's intermittent barking helped guide her back to the right location, though the dog's calls were becoming weaker as exhaustion set in. When she reached the canyon rim again, Sarah could hear Emma crying softly below. "Mommy, I'm so cold." And Rex is shivering too. His fur is all wet. Sarah's heart broke as she realized that Rex was not only protecting Emma from falling, but was also sharing his body heat to keep her warm. The devoted dog was sacrificing his own comfort and safety to give Emma the best chance of survival. "I'm here, sweetheart," Sarah called down. "I brought warm blankets and I'm going to find a way to get them down to you." Sarah quickly tied several extension cords together, creating a lifeline that was just long enough to reach the ledge. She secured one end to a sturdy tree trunk and carefully lowered the other end down to Emma and Rex. The rope swayed and twisted in the canyon breeze, but it held firm under the test weight Sarah applied. "Emma, can you grab the rope?" Sarah asked. "I'll try," came the weak reply from below. Sarah watched anxiously as Emma's small hand reached out for the dangling rope. Rex seemed to understand what was happening and carefully shifted his position to help Emma reach the lifeline without endangering herself. The intelligent dog's cooperation was remarkable, especially considering his own injuries and exhaustion. Once Emma had a grip on the rope, Sarah carefully lowered a small bundle containing her warmest jacket, a thick blanket, and some energy bars from Mike's emergency kit. The bundle swayed wildly as it descended, but Rex helped guide it safely to the ledge with his nose. "Put on the jacket and wrap the blanket around both you and Rex," Sarah instructed. "The energy bars will help keep your strength up." For the first time in hours, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. Emma's voice sounded a bit stronger after she got the warm clothes, and Rex's protective barking resumed with more energy. The supplies had bought them some time, but Sarah still needed to figure out how to get them off the ledge safely. The hand crank radio produced mostly static, but after several minutes of adjusting the antenna and trying different frequencies, Sarah managed to pick up a weak signal from the Pine Valley Emergency Services. The connection was poor and kept cutting out, but she was able to communicate the basic facts of the emergency. "This is Dispatcher Johnson," a crackling voice said, through the static. "Did you say Devil's Canyon? That's a very difficult rescue location. Our technical rescue team is currently responding to another emergency, but we'll send whatever help we can as soon as possible." "How long will that take?" Sarah asked desperately. The static increased, making the response difficult to understand, but Sarah caught the words, "several hours," and "weather moving in." Sarah looked up at the sky and realized with growing alarm that thick clouds were gathering overhead. The weather forecast had predicted possible rain showers, but she hadn't been paying attention to the timing. If a storm hit while Emma and Rex were trapped on that exposed ledge, the situation would become even more dangerous. As if reading her thoughts, Emma's voice drifted up from below. "Mommy, I think I felt a raindrop." Sarah knew she couldn't wait for professional rescuers. She had to attempt a rescue herself despite having no real climbing experience. The extension cord lifeline was strong enough to support her weight, and she had Mike's basic climbing harness. It wasn't an ideal situation, but it was Emma's only chance. "Emma, I'm coming down to get you," Sarah announced, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "No, Mommy," Emma cried. "It's too dangerous. What if you fall too?" Sarah was touched by her daughter's concern for her safety, even in such desperate circumstances. "Rex will help me, just like he's been helping you. That brave dog won't let anything happen to either of us." As Sarah prepared to descend into the canyon, she could hear Rex's encouraging bark from below. The dog seemed to understand that Sarah was attempting a rescue, and his tail was actually wagging despite the dire circumstances. Rex's unwavering optimism and protective instincts had kept Emma alive this long, and Sarah prayed that his heroic nature would see all three of them through the next crucial phase of the rescue. Sarah put on Mike's climbing harness and attached herself to the extension cord lifeline with trembling fingers. She had watched Mike use this equipment before, but she had never tried it herself. One mistake could result in 3 deaths instead of just 2. As the first fat raindrops began to fall from the darkening sky, Sarah took a deep breath and began her descent into Devil's Canyon. Below her, Rex barked once in what sounded like encouragement, as if the loyal dog was trying to give her courage for the dangerous journey ahead. Emma and Rex were depending on her, and Sarah was determined not to let them down. The rough rock face scraped against her hands and knees as she slowly worked her way down the canyon wall, The extension cord stretched and creaked under her weight, but it held firm. 20 feet down, then 25, then 30. She was almost there. Just as Sarah reached the 35-foot mark, disaster struck. The increasing rain had made the rock slippery, and her foot slipped on a wet ledge. She swung wildly on the rope, slamming into the canyon wall with enough force to knock the wind out of her lungs. For a terrifying moment, she thought she might lose her grip and fall to her death, leaving Emma and Rex to die alone on their precarious perch. The forest grew thicker and more treacherous as Sarah followed Rex's urgent barking deeper into the Pine Valley wilderness. Fallen logs blocked her path, forcing her to climb over rotting bark that crumbled under her weight. Thorny vines caught her clothes and scraped her skin, while hidden roots threatened to trip her with every step. The canopy overhead was so dense that even the fading afternoon light barely penetrated to the forest floor. Sarah's flashlight beam danced wildly as she pushed forward, illuminating patches of moss-covered rocks and twisted tree branches that seemed to reach out like gnarled fingers. Her breath came in short gasps, partly from physical exertion but mostly from the growing terror that something terrible had happened to Emma. Rex's barking had become more frantic, echoing off the canyon walls in a way that made it difficult to pinpoint his exact location. "Emma, can you hear Mommy?" Sarah called out repeatedly, her voice cracking with emotion. She paused every few minutes to listen for any response, but heard only Rex's persistent barking and the eerie sounds of the forest coming alive as darkness approached. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted mournfully, and Sarah could hear the rustle of small animals moving through the underbrush. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, Sarah finally reached the edge of Devil's Canyon. The sight that greeted her made her blood run cold. The canyon was deeper than she had expected, with rocky walls that dropped straight down for at least 40 feet before disappearing into shadows. Ancient pine trees grew at impossible angles from cracks in the rock face, their roots clinging desperately to tiny ledges. Rex's barking was definitely coming from somewhere down in the canyon, but Sarah couldn't see him or Emma from her position, at the rim. She got down on her hands and knees and carefully crawled to the edge, shining her flashlight down into the darkness. The beam revealed a narrow ledge about 15 feet down, and on that ledge, Sarah could make out two small figures, huddled together. "Emma!" Sarah cried out, her voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Emma, are you okay?" A weak voice answered from below. "Mommy, I'm here. Rex is with me." Relief flooded through Sarah's body, followed immediately by a new wave of fear. Emma was alive and conscious, but she was trapped on a narrow ledge high above the canyon floor. One wrong move could send her plummeting into the darkness below. "I'm going to get help, sweetheart," Sarah called down. "Stay exactly where you are. Don't move." "I can't move," Emma's small voice replied. "My leg hurts really bad and I'm scared." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to figure out what to do. Her cell phone still showed no signal, and she was at least a mile from the nearest road. Even if she could somehow contact the sheriff's department or fire department, it would take hours for a professional rescue team to hike in with the proper equipment. Emma might not be able to hold on that long, especially if she was injured. The temperature was already dropping as the sun disappeared behind the western mountains. Soon it would be completely dark and the October night would become dangerously cold. Emma was wearing only her purple sweater and jeans, not nearly enough protection against the mountain chill. Rex's barking had changed from urgent calls for help to a softer, more reassuring tone. Sarah realized that the faithful dog was trying to keep Emma calm and warm while they waited for rescue. She could hear him moving around on the ledge, probably positioning himself between Emma and the edge to prevent her from accidentally rolling off. "Rex is taking care of me," Emma called up, her voice sounding stronger. "He's keeping me warm and he won't let me fall." Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she understood the full magnitude of what had happened. Somehow, Emma had fallen into the canyon, probably while chasing a butterfly or trying to collect an interesting leaf near the rim. Rex had either fallen with her or deliberately jumped down to protect her. Now the loyal dog was literally standing between Emma and death, using his own body as a barrier while they waited for help that might come too late. Sarah knew she couldn't leave Emma alone in the canyon while she went for help. The ledge looked unstable, and if it collapsed, her daughter would fall to the rocky bottom far below. But she also couldn't climb down to reach Emma without proper equipment. The canyon walls were too steep and crumbly to provide safe handholds. As Sarah struggled with this impossible decision, she heard Rex's barking change again. This time his bark was directed upward toward her, and it carried a different message. The intelligent dog seemed to be trying to communicate something specific, something important about Emma's condition or their situation. Sarah shined her flashlight down more carefully, trying to get a better view of the ledge where Emma and Rex were trapped. What she saw made her gasp in horror. The ledge was even narrower than she had first thought, barely wide enough for Emma to lie down safely. Worse yet, she could see cracks running through the rock, suggesting that the entire ledge might give way at any moment. But Rex had positioned himself perfectly to provide maximum protection for Emma. The large dog was lying lengthwise along the outer edge of the ledge, his body forming a living barrier between Emma and the fatal drop. His powerful legs were braced against small rocks and tree roots, giving him the stability to prevent both of them from sliding off if the ledge shifted. "Emma, I need you to listen very carefully," Sarah called down, trying to keep her voice calm despite her terror. "Is Rex hurt? Can you tell if he's bleeding or limping?" There was a pause before Emma answered. "I think he hurt his paw when we fell, but he's not crying. He keeps licking my face and making me feel better." "Mommy, I'm sorry I went past the big oak tree. I saw a pretty red bird and I followed it and then the ground just disappeared." Sarah's heart ached for her daughter's guilt and fear. "It's okay, sweetheart, you're not in trouble. Rex is being very brave, and I'm going to get both of you out of there." But even as she spoke these reassuring words, Sarah had no idea how she was going to keep that promise. The situation seemed hopeless. Emma was injured and trapped on an unstable ledge 40 feet above jagged rocks. Rex was probably hurt too, but was using all his strength to keep Emma safe. And Sarah was alone in the wilderness with no way to call for professional help. As full darkness settled over the canyon, Sarah realized that Rex's heroic actions had bought them time. But time was running out quickly. The dog's incredible loyalty and intelligence had prevented a tragedy so far, but unless Sarah could figure out a way to rescue them soon, all three of them might not survive the night. The real test of Rex's devotion to Emma was just beginning. October in Pine Valley brought crisp mornings and afternoon sunshine that painted the forest in brilliant shades of red, orange, and gold. Emma had settled into her new school routine and made several friends, but her favorite time was still the hours after school when she could play outside with Rex. The loyal German Shepherd mix had become more than just a pet. He was her constant companion, adventure buddy, and source of comfort whenever the world felt overwhelming. Mike had been away on his longest business trip yet, a 10-day journey through 3 states to secure new clients for his company. Sarah missed him terribly, especially during the quiet evenings when Emma was asleep and the house felt too big and empty. However, Rex's presence made the solitude bearable. The dog seemed to sense when Sarah felt lonely or anxious, often resting his large head on her lap while she read or watched television. On a particularly beautiful Tuesday afternoon, Sarah was working in her home office trying to balance their monthly budget and catch up on correspondence. Emma had arrived home from school an hour earlier, full of excitement about an art project she was creating for her teacher. She had changed into her favorite purple sweater and jeans, grabbed her small backpack filled with art supplies, and announced her intention to work on the project outside. "I want to make leaf pictures using real leaves," Emma explained, her eyes sparkling with creativity. "Mrs. Henderson said we can glue them onto paper to make animals and flowers." Sarah looked up from her computer and glanced out the window. The afternoon sun was still bright, and their backyard looked peaceful and safe. Rex was already at the back door, tail wagging, ready to accompany Emma on whatever adventure she had planned. "Stay in our yard," Sarah reminded her daughter. "Don't go past the big oak tree and stay away from the creek. I'll come check on you in a little while." Emma nodded enthusiastically and bounded outside with Rex at her side. Sarah watched through the window as her daughter began collecting colorful leaves near the garden, while Rex maintained his usual protective position a few feet away, alert and watchful. For the next hour, Sarah worked steadily on her computer, occasionally glancing outside to see Emma and Rex moving slowly around the yard. The dog never strayed, far from the little girl, and Emma seemed completely absorbed in her artistic mission. Sarah felt grateful for Rex's constant vigilance, knowing that she could focus on her work without constantly worrying about Emma's safety. Around 4 o'clock, Sarah noticed that the afternoon light was beginning to fade. She saved her work and decided to check on Emma, maybe bring her some apple juice and cookies for a snack break. When she looked out the window, however, she couldn't see Emma or Rex anywhere in the backyard. A small flutter of concern stirred in Sarah's chest. She opened the back door and called Emma's name, expecting to hear her daughter's cheerful response from behind one of the larger trees. When only silence greeted her, the flutter of concern grew into genuine worry. "Emma? Rex?" Sarah called louder, stepping onto the back deck and scanning the yard more carefully. She could see Emma's small backpack sitting abandoned near the garden, surrounded by scattered leaves and a few colored pencils. But there was no sign of her daughter or their dog. Sarah's heart began to beat faster as she walked across the yard, calling Emma's name repeatedly. She checked behind the tool shed, around the large oak tree that marked Emma's boundary, and even looked up into the branches thinking her adventurous daughter might have climbed higher than usual. Still nothing. When she reached the edge of their property where it bordered the Pine Valley National Forest, Sarah felt a cold knot of fear forming in her stomach. The dense woods stretched for miles in every direction, filled with steep ravines, hidden streams, and wildlife trails that could confuse even experienced hikers. If Emma had somehow wandered into the forest, finding her before dark would be extremely difficult. "Emma, please answer, Mommy," Sarah shouted, her voice carrying across the quiet valley. The only response was the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Sarah ran back to the house and grabbed her cell phone, hoping to call for help, but the screen showed no service bars. Their landline was working, but when she called the local sheriff's office, the connection was filled with static that made communication nearly impossible. Panic began to set in as Sarah realized she was essentially alone in dealing with this crisis. Mike was somewhere in Colorado, unreachable until evening. Their nearest neighbors were too far away to hear her calls for help. The sun was already sinking lower behind the mountains, and temperatures would drop rapidly once darkness fell. Sarah forced herself to think logically despite her fear. Emma was a smart, responsible child who followed rules carefully. She wouldn't have wandered into the forest without a very good reason. And Rex was with her, which meant that whatever had happened, Emma wasn't completely alone. The dog's protective instincts were so strong that he would never let Emma face danger by herself. Maybe they had seen an injured animal and Rex had led Emma to help it. Maybe Emma had heard something interesting in the woods and convinced Rex to investigate with her. Or maybe they were both perfectly safe somewhere nearby, and Sarah was panicking over nothing. But as the minutes ticked by and her calls continued to go unanswered, Sarah's rational explanations began to crumble. Something was wrong. Emma would never stay away this long without telling her mother where she was going, and Rex would never allow Emma to be in danger if he could prevent it. Sarah grabbed a flashlight, put on her hiking boots, and headed toward the forest boundary. She had to find Emma before full darkness fell. As she walked, she tried to remember everything Mike had taught her about the local wilderness during their weekend hikes. The forest was beautiful but dangerous, especially for a small child. There were steep cliffs hidden by thick vegetation, fast-moving streams that could sweep away an unwary hiker, and wild animals that became more active after sunset. Just as Sarah reached the edge of the trees, she heard something that made her heart stop. It was Rex's bark, distant but unmistakably urgent. The sound came from deep within the forest, far beyond where Emma was supposed to be playing. Rex was calling for help, and his bark carried a tone of desperation that Sarah had never heard before. Without hesitation, Sarah plunged into the woods, following the sound of Rex's barking. Branches scratched at her face and arms as she pushed through the underbrush, calling Emma's name between the dog's persistent alerts. The barking seemed to be coming from the direction of Devil's Canyon, a steep ravine that local hikers were warned to avoid because of its unstable rock formations and hidden drop-offs. As Sarah struggled through the increasingly dense forest, Rex's barking became more frequent and more urgent. The loyal dog was trying to tell her something important, and Sarah knew that whatever had happened to Emma, Rex was doing everything in his power to help her. She just prayed that she would reach them in time. Sarah Thompson had always dreamed of raising her children in a place where they could run freely and explore nature. After years of living in a cramped city apartment, she and her husband Mike finally saved enough money to buy a small house on the outskirts of Pine Valley, a quiet mountain town surrounded by dense forests and rolling hills. The move felt like a fresh start for their family, especially for their 6-year-old daughter Emma, who had been struggling with anxiety in the busy city environment. The house sat on 2 acres of land, with a large backyard that bordered the Pine Valley National Forest. Ancient oak trees provided shade during hot summer days, and a small creek ran along the eastern edge of their property. Emma fell in love with the place immediately, spending hours collecting colorful leaves and watching squirrels chase each other through the branches. For the first time in months, Sarah saw her daughter smile without worry clouding her bright blue eyes. However, Sarah couldn't shake a nagging feeling of unease about their new home's remote location. The nearest neighbor lived half a mile away, and the town center was a 20-minute drive down a winding mountain road. Cell phone reception was spotty at best, and their landline connection often crackled with static during storms. Mike worked as a traveling salesman and was frequently away for days at a time, leaving Sarah alone with Emma in the isolated house. "Maybe we should get a dog," Mike suggested one evening, as they sat on their front porch watching Emma chase fireflies. "It would be good company for both of you when I'm on the road, and dogs are great with kids." Sarah had been thinking the same thing. She remembered how her childhood dog, a gentle collie named Rusty, had been her constant companion and protector. Emma would love that, she agreed, watching their daughter's delighted laughter echo across the quiet valley. The next weekend, the Thompson family visited the Pine Valley Animal Shelter, a small facility run by volunteers from the community. The shelter housed mostly mixed breeds and older dogs that had been abandoned or lost in the surrounding wilderness. Sarah wanted a calm, family-friendly dog that would be gentle with Emma, but also alert enough to serve as a watchdog. As they walked through the kennels, most dogs barked excitedly or cowered in the back corners of their enclosures. But one dog stood out immediately. In the last kennel sat a large German Shepherd mix with intelligent amber eyes and a thick coat of black and tan fur. The nameplate on his cage read, "Rex, age 3, found wandering Highway 7. When Emma approached his kennel, Rex stood calmly and walked to the fence, his tail wagging slowly. He didn't bark or jump like the other dogs. Instead, he sat down and tilted his head, studying the little girl with remarkable focus. Emma giggled and reached through the chain link to pet his soft ears. "He likes you, sweetie," Sarah observed, impressed by the dog's gentle demeanor. Linda Martinez, the shelter volunteer, joined them at Rex's kennel. "He's been here for 3 months," she explained. "Someone found him on the highway, probably lost from a camping trip or maybe abandoned. He's incredibly smart and well-trained, but nobody's claimed him. We think he might have some working dog background, maybe search and rescue or police training, because he responds to hand signals and seems to understand complex commands." Mike knelt down to Rex's level and extended his hand. The dog sniffed carefully, then licked his fingers gently. "He seems perfect for our family," Mike said. The adoption process was straightforward, and within an hour, Rex was riding home in the back seat of their SUV with Emma's arms wrapped around his neck. He seemed to understand that he was going to his new home, sitting alertly and watching the scenery pass by the window. From the moment they arrived home, Rex took his role as Emma's protector seriously. He followed her everywhere, staying within a few feet whether she was playing in the backyard, helping Sarah in the garden, or reading books on the living room floor. At night, he slept beside Emma's bed, his ears perked up at every sound that might indicate danger. Sarah was amazed by Rex's intelligence and intuition. He seemed to sense Emma's moods and needs before anyone else. When Emma felt nervous about starting at her new school, Rex would rest his head on her lap until she calmed down. When she scraped her knee while playing outside, Rex immediately ran to find Sarah, leading her to where Emma sat crying. "It's like he understands everything she's thinking," Sarah told Mike during one of his phone calls from the road. "I've never seen such a strong bond between a child and a dog." Rex also proved to be an excellent guard dog without being aggressive. He would bark once or twice to alert the family when visitors arrived, but he never showed hostility toward friends or delivery drivers. However, Sarah noticed that he became more vigilant when Mike was away, positioning himself near windows and doors, constantly scanning their surroundings for potential threats. The dog's presence gave Sarah tremendous peace of mind during Mike's business trips. She no longer felt isolated or vulnerable in their remote home. Rex's protective instincts and obvious devotion to Emma made her feel like her family was safe, even when they were alone in the house. As autumn arrived and the leaves began to change colors, Emma and Rex spent countless hours exploring their property. The dog seemed to know every inch of their land, from the old stone wall that marked their boundary to the various wildlife trails that crisscrossed through their woods. Emma trusted Rex completely, following him on adventures through the trees and along the creek, confident that he would never let her get lost or hurt. Sarah often watched them from the kitchen window, marveling at how Rex stayed between Emma and any potential danger, whether it was a steep slope near the creek or a patch of thorny bushes. The dog had an uncanny ability to predict problems before they occurred, gently steering Emma away from hazards while still allowing her the freedom to explore and play. Their peaceful new life in Pine Valley seemed perfect, but Sarah had no idea that Rex's protective instincts and unwavering loyalty to Emma would soon be tested in ways she never could have imagined. The dangerous wilderness that surrounded their home held secrets and threats that would push the devoted dog to perform, an act of heroism that would change their family forever.